joining me on Fascinating Frontiers, episode 85, coming to you on May 30th, 2026. Let's look at what's new across the frontiers of space and science. Blue Origin's New Glenn test failure at Cape Canaveral now threatens to push back NASA's Artemis crewed lunar landing schedule. An explosion during testing at Cape Canaveral has triggered immediate schedule reviews at NASA. Artemis lunar lander development depends on Blue Origin's BE-4 engines and the New Glenn vehicle. Any extended stand-down could ripple through both commercial and government payloads. Program managers are now assessing alternative paths, with a formal update expected within weeks. On a different note, United Launch Alliance completed its second-to-last Atlas V flight for Amazon's LEO constellation. The LEO Atlas 07 mission lifted off from Pad 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at 7:53 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The rocket carried 29 satellites into low Earth orbit. The launch marks continued progress toward an operational broadband constellation. The final Atlas V LEO mission is scheduled later this year. NASA's MAVEN spacecraft observed unexpected plasma squeezing in the Martian atmosphere. The measurements show regions where the solar wind interacts differently than previously modeled. This finding refines understanding of how Mars lost much of its early atmosphere. Researchers will compare the data against future orbiter passes. Follow-up papers are expected once the full data set is processed. The MAVEN findings on plasma squeezing at Mars add a new layer to the long-running story of atmospheric loss on the red planet. The orbiter's measurements show localized compression that earlier models did not predict, tightening constraints on how solar wind strips ions over time. This directly informs the open question of whether Mars ever held a thicker atmosphere capable of supporting surface liquid water for extended periods. Watch for the next MAVEN data release and any coordinated observations with the European Space Agency's Trace Gas Orbiter. You know what is fascinating about this? If the Sun were replaced by a typical red dwarf, Earth would orbit inside the star's habitable zone, yet face radiation levels hundreds of times higher than we receive today. Charged particles and intense ultraviolet flares slam into the upper atmosphere, heating it until gas molecules reach escape velocity. A single powerful flare can strip away thousands of tons of atmosphere in hours, and many red dwarfs produce such events several times per week. Over 1 billion years, this relentless bombardment can reduce an Earth-like world to a thin remnant or bare rock. The exact balance between a planet's magnetic field strength, its initial atmosphere mass, and the star's activity history remains unknown, leaving astronomers unsure which worlds might retain enough air for life to persist. Shifting to the Moon, the Shenzhou 22 spacecraft brought back the latest set of science samples from the Tiangong space station. Experiments covered materials science, fluid physics, and biology. Ground teams will now conduct follow-up analysis on the returned specimens. This marks the 10th such recovery mission supporting station research. Additional sample returns are planned through the end of the year. On the business side, 7 companies were selected for the Johnson Space Center Multiple Award Construction Contract. The work covers up to $300 million in facility upgrades, utilities, and equipment improvements. All funds must be obligated by September 30th, 2026. The contract supports ongoing mission operations at the Houston campus. Construction projects will begin once task orders are issued. 3 members of the SpaceX Crew 11 mission will appear at NASA headquarters on June 1st. The event begins at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the Webb Auditorium. It forms part of the crew's standard post-flight visit. Attendees can watch the discussion in person or via NASA's live stream. The session offers direct insight into the recent International Space Station expedition. In the evening sky, the constellation Boretz and its bright star Arcturus form a kite-like shape high in the east an hour after sunset. Viewers are encouraged to trace the kite-like shape formed by nearby stars. Simple binoculars or the naked eye are sufficient. The guide also notes the double star Nu Draconis for splitting. A gathering in Sligo examined how Irish companies can participate in space exploration supply chains. Discussions covered satellite services, data applications, and component manufacturing. Local firms heard from established European space contractors. The event aimed to position the region for future contracts. Follow-on workshops are expected later this year. The documentary Spacewoman focuses on Eileen Collins and her 4 space flights. The film covers her path from Air Force test pilot to commanding STS-93 and STS-114. Archival footage and interviews highlight barriers she navigated. The documentary is now screening at select venues. A wider release is planned for later in 2026. The latest manifest lists upcoming Falcon 9, Atlas V, and Starship attempts from Florida pads. Several Starlink missions and a national security payload are queued for June. Weather and range availability will determine final dates. The schedule is refreshed weekly on the newspaper's site. Viewers can track changes through the coming month. A post notes that the Apollo 11 lunar module computer contained only 4 kilobytes of RAM. The system still performed the powered descent and landing sequence successfully. Modern comparisons show how far onboard processing has advanced since 1969. Commenters discussed the trade-offs between reliability and capability in early flight computers. The thread links to technical papers on the Apollo guidance system. A visitor to the Adler Planetarium described using the demonstration model and now seeks a working personal version. The post explains the sphere's use in modeling celestial coordinates. Responses pointed to museum replicas and educational suppliers. No commercial full-scale versions under a few $1,000s were identified. The discussion continues in the comments. Next time, we will be watching for the final Atlas V LEO mission and any updates on New Glenn testing. That covers today's space and science news. Share this with a fellow space enthusiast if you found it interesting. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you tomorrow. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.